In 1943, a pound of dried beans cost 9 cents. A family of 6 still couldn't always count on having them. So the women in those kitchens learned to work with what was. Number 17 on this list is the one that stops people. 1 egg. 6 people at the table. She made it work, not by luck, but by knowing exactly what 1 egg could do in hot broth, and how far a heel of bread could stretch it. Number 10 is the night she fed 7 people for 11 cents. Every cent accounted for, not improvised, planned. And number 5, there's one item that never left those kitchens, no matter what else ran out. Same shelf, same skillet, year after year. It held everything together. 25 suppers from the 1940s. What actually went on the table when there wasn't much and supper still had to happen. If that kitchen sounds familiar, subscribe so you don't miss one. Now let's start at 25. Number 25, bread and gravy, bread and gravy. That's where we start. Not because it's the most complicated supper on this list, it's the least, but because it tells you everything about how a 1940s kitchen thought. When the meat was done, the pan wasn't. Whatever had cooked in it, pork, chicken, a small piece of beef, if the week had been good, left behind drippings. Fat and fond, and the concentrated smell of everything that had just been eaten. Most people today pour that down the drain. The women in those kitchens looked at it and saw supper. 2 tablespoons of flour stirred into the drippings over medium heat until the raw smell cooked off. Then water, not stock, not milk, just water from the tap. Added slow, stirred constant, washed until it thickened into something that moved like gravy because it was gravy. Salt, pepper, poured hot over torn white bread in a bowl. A loaf of bread ran about 22 cents in 1943. The drippings cost nothing. They were already there. This wasn't the supper anyone planned for. It was the supper the pan offered when the planned supper had already been eaten. And the women who made it understood something that takes a long time to learn, that the bottom of a hot pan, worked right, gives you more flavor than the thing that cooked in it. What she did, with almost nothing, is only going to get harder to explain the further we go. 24. Milk toast. Some suppers were medicine. Milk toast was both. A slice of white bread, toasted until just firm, buttered while still hot, laid in a shallow bowl. Warm whole milk poured over the top, not boiling, not cold, but the temperature of something that had been sitting on the back of the stove, waiting. A pinch of salt, sometimes a spoon of sugar, if the child was sick or the night had been hard. The toast softened from the bottom up. The edges went first, then the center, until what you had wasn't bread anymore, but something between a dumpling and a porridge, still holding its shape, if you moved the spoon carefully, giving way completely, if you didn't. A half-gallon of whole milk cost about 65 cents in 1943. 1 slice of bread. That was the whole recipe. Mothers made this when children couldn't hold anything else down. When someone came in from the cold and needed something warm before they could talk about their day. When supper had been thin and an hour later the kitchen was quiet and there was still someone sitting at the table not quite ready for bed. It didn't taste like a meal. It tasted like being taken care of. That's a different thing entirely. And it's one of the first things that disappeared when convenience food arrived, and taking care of someone started to mean driving somewhere instead of standing at the stove. The pot for the next supper has been on since morning. That one's been waiting all day. Number 23, salt pork and cornbread. Salt pork was in the kitchen before the week started and still there when it ended. A thick slab of cured pork belly, heavily salted, sometimes smoked, sold from a barrel or wrapped in paper at the general store. In 1943, it ran about 12 cents a pound, and a single piece could flavor 3 or 4 suppers before it was spent. You rendered it slow in a cast iron skillet, letting the fat run clear and the edges crisp into something close to bacon, but denser, more serious. The cornbread baked alongside in a separate skillet, cornmeal, salt, a little lard, buttermilk if you had it, water if you didn't. Poured into a hot greased pan and into the oven for 20 minutes. You ate the pork on the side, or crumbled into the cornbread, or dragged through the fat left in the pan. This wasn't backup food. In households across the rural South and Midwest, this was the supper, the one planned for, the one children expected on certain nights and were glad to find. Salt pork didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. That was the point of it. What she could do when one ingredient did the work of three comes into full view at number 22. Number 22, bean soup. With ham hock, she started this one in the morning. That's the first thing to understand about bean soup with a ham hock. It wasn't a quick supper. It was a decision made at 7 in the morning that the family would eat well at 6 in the evening. A ham hock cost about 15 cents in 1943, the shank end of a cured leg, more bone and collagen than meat, which was exactly the point. Dropped into a pot of cold water with a pound of dried navy beans that had soaked overnight. Brought to a boil, then dropped to the lowest possible simmer and left alone. 1 onion halved. Salt held until the end, because salt early toughens beans. By mid-afternoon, the liquid had turned opaque and amber. The beans had swelled and softened until the skin slipped. The meat around the hock had loosened from the bone in long threads that fell apart at the touch of a spoon. A pot that fed 6 cost less than 30 cents. It required 4 minutes of active work and 6 hours of time. That trade, patience exchanged for substance, was the governing logic of the entire 1940s kitchen. Not every supper could afford to be fast. Number 21 understood that better than most. Number 21, fried cornmeal mush. Tuesday's supper became Thursday's supper. That was the rule. Cornmeal mush. Cornmeal cooked in salted water until thick, poured into a loaf pan, and left in the icebox overnight, set up firm enough to slice. 2 days later, those cold slices went into a skillet with a spoon of lard over medium-high heat and stayed there, untouched, until a crust formed on the bottom. This is the part that requires patience. Move it too soon, and the crust doesn't form. Leave it alone for 3 minutes, and you get something that behaves like a different food entirely. Crisp and deeply golden on the outside, creamy and soft through the center. Turn once. 3 more minutes. Served with sorghum molasses or with the drippings from whatever meat had cooked earlier in the week. A pound of cornmeal cost about 19 cents and yielded enough mush for 2 suppers. The second supper cost nothing beyond the lard it fried in. The 1940s kitchen did not consider this clever. It was just the correct thing to do with leftover mush. Waste was not a philosophy. It was a failure. Number 20 is the supper built on the same logic. 1 pot, almost nothing in it, stretched into something that satisfied. Number 20, potato soup. No cream. No bacon crumbles on top. No chives. Potato soup in a 1940s working-class kitchen was water, potatoes, 1 onion, a piece of fatback, and salt. That was the complete list. The potatoes went in diced or sliced thin, depending on the household. The onion went in whole or rough chopped. The fatback rendered into the water as everything simmered, leaving a broth that tasted faintly of pork and starch and something almost sweet from the onion cooking down. Potatoes ran about 2 cents a pound in 1943. An onion cost a penny. This was a 10-cent supper for a family of 5. When the potatoes were fully soft, some women mashed a portion against the side of the pot with a spoon, not all of it, just enough to thicken the broth without turning it stiff. Others left it brothier and served it over cornbread. It didn't taste like deprivation. It tasted like a potato cooked through in a warm and faintly savory liquid, eaten on a cold evening. The restaurants that charge $14 for potato soup today add cream and leeks and call it elevated. The women who made this version would look at that bowl and recognize immediately what they'd taken out and why they were wrong too. What she found for free growing behind the house is number 19. Number 19, dandelion greens. With bacon drippings in April and May, the yard was the pantry. Dandelion greens, pulled from the ground before the plant flowered, when the leaves were still tender and only mildly bitter, washed in cold water, dried, and dropped into a skillet that already held a spoon of bacon drippings over medium heat. Wilted down in 2 minutes. Hit with a splash of apple cider vinegar while still in the pan, which cut the bitterness and made the whole skillet smell briefly like something between a salad and a pickle. Salt. A pinch of sugar sometimes. Eaten hot, straight from the skillet. This cost nothing. The drippings were already saved in the jar by the stove. The greens came from the yard. The vinegar was in every kitchen. Families who knew this, and in rural households across the South and Appalachians, most did, stretched the end of winter into early spring without the pantry giving out. The earth started offering things before the garden was planted. You had to know what to look for and when to pick it. That knowledge was botanical and practical and entirely specific to someone who had been taught it by hand, in the yard, by someone who learned it the same way. Number 18 is what she put up in August, so she'd have something to pour over bread in February. Number 18, stewed tomatoes on bread she canned in August for this exact night. Stewed tomatoes, whole or rough crushed tomatoes put up in jars during the summer's peak, when the garden was producing faster than a family could eat, opened in February, and poured into a saucepan with a tablespoon of butter and a pinch of sugar. Heated until the butter melted through and the tomatoes softened further, the liquid reducing slightly into something thicker and sweeter than it started. Poured hot over slices of white bread laid flat in a bowl. The bread absorbed the tomatoes from below. The butter rose to the surface in small golden pools. A quart jar of home-canned tomatoes cost the price of a canning lid and the labor of an August afternoon. In February, it was worth considerably more than that. This is the supper that required the most planning of anything on this list, not because of what happened at the stove, but because of what happened 6 months earlier. The woman who made this supper on a February night in 1944 had made the decision to make it in August 1943. She was cooking 6 months in advance, without calling it that. Number 17 is where one of the threads from the beginning of this list finally closes. You'll remember, 1 egg, 6 people. Here's how she did it. Number 17, egg drop soup. 1 egg, 6 people at the table. This is how she did it. She started with broth, not stock, from a carton, but the water left from boiling any meat, or simply water, with salt and a piece of fatback dropped in, and simmered for 20 minutes, until it tasted of something hot, just below a boil. She beat 1 egg in a cup, with a fork, until the yolk and white were fully combined. Then she poured it in a slow, thin stream into the hot broth, stirring constantly as she poured. The egg cooked on contact with the liquid, forming soft threads that distributed through the pot. Not a poached egg sitting in broth, but something that became part of the broth itself. Then the bread, day-old white bread torn into rough pieces and dropped in, swelling immediately as it absorbed the liquid, thickening the whole pot into something closer to a stew than a soup. 6 bowls from 1 egg, a heel of bread, and salted water. This is not a trick. It's not a workaround. It's a technique, the understanding that an egg beaten and streamed into hot liquid becomes something that can feed more people than an egg fried in a pan ever could. She knew that. She learned it from someone who knew it before her. And number 16 is the supper she turned to when she had more time than money and beans on the shelf. Number 16, pinto beans and cornbread. Some suppers don't need explaining to the people who grew up on them. Pinto beans and cornbread is one. Dried pinto beans, soaked the night before, simmered all day with a piece of salt pork or a ham bone, until the beans were fully soft and the pot liquor had thickened into something rich and dark. Salt added at the end, black pepper, sometimes a raw onion on the side, eaten in bites between spoonfuls the way certain households always did it. The cornbread baked hard and thin in a cast iron skillet, the kind with a crust on the bottom, from going into a pan already hot with lard. You crumbled the cornbread into the beans or ate them side by side. The pot liquor soaked into the cornbread within seconds. In 1943, a pound of dried pintos cost about 9 cents. Cornmeal was 19 cents a pound. This supper fed a family of 5 for under 30 cents. But here's what the price doesn't tell you. In the households where pinto beans and cornbread appeared on the table, it wasn't the fallback supper. It was often the requested one, the one children asked for by name, the one that appeared at church suppers and family gatherings by choice, not necessity. Calling it poor man's food was always a category error. Number 15 is 9 cents for 4 people, and nobody left hungry. Number 15, fried fatback, with biscuits 9 cents. For people, nobody went to bed hungry. Fatback, pure cured pork fat, with a thin layer of meat running through it, sliced thin, and laid into a cold, dry skillet. Brought up to medium heat slowly, so the fat rendered, without burning, the edges crisping, into something brittle and deeply savory. while the center stayed soft and rich. No oil needed. The fat provided its own. The biscuits were flour, lard, salt, baking powder, and buttermilk, turned out onto a floured board, patted not rolled, cut with the rim of a glass, and baked in a hot oven for 12 minutes. The fat back went on the biscuit or beside it. The rendered fat left in the skillet became the beginning of tomorrow's gravy. A pound of fatback cost about 8 cents in 1943. A cup of flour, a spoon of lard, a splash of buttermilk, another cent, maybe 2. The biscuit itself is worth sitting with for a moment. Made correctly, fat cut into flour until it resembles coarse meal, liquid added just until the dough comes together, handled as little as possible. A biscuit is as technically demanding as anything in professional baking. The women who turned them out every morning before the family woke did not think of themselves as skilled. They were just making biscuits. Number 14 is where she found one more use for the part of the pig most people forgot about. Number 14, crackling bread. After the fat back was rendered, after the salt pork was sliced, something remained in the pan, cracklings. The small, crisped remnants of pork skin and fat that hadn't fully dissolved into the liquid. Brittle, deeply browned, intensely flavored. She didn't throw them away. She folded them into the cornbread batter before it went into the skillet, cracklings distributed through the dough, baking into the bread, so that each piece held pockets of crunch and salt and rendered pork throughout. Crackling bread required nothing extra. No additional fat, no additional salt. The cracklings brought both. The cornbread became richer, more complex, more satisfying than plain cornbread, and the cook had used a thing that cost nothing because it was already there. This is the supper that makes the whole accounting visible. The pig came into the kitchen and left it almost entirely. Fat for cooking, meat for eating, bones for broth, skin rendered into cracklings folded into bread. Nothing waiting in the pan that didn't have a use already determined for it. That total accounting, the refusal to let anything be waste, was not thrift as a value. It was thrift as a skill, a practiced, specific, transmittable skill, which is worth saying plainly before we go further. Number 13, boiled cabbage, with salt pork boiled cabbage. One head, quartered, dropped into a pot of salted water, with a piece of salt pork already simmering at the bottom. Cooked until the cabbage was fully soft, not crisp tender the way restaurants serve it now, but genuinely soft, yielding, the leaves almost silky, where they'd absorbed the pork-flavored water. Eaten in a bowl, with the cooking liquid ladled over the top, and a piece of cornbread alongside. A head of cabbage cost about 5 cents in 1943. The salt pork had already been working in that pot for 20 minutes before the cabbage went in. There are 11 suppers left on this list. And somewhere around this point, the middle of a list of meals that cost pennies, that fed families who had almost nothing, that asked for patience more than skill, it's worth stopping for a moment on a single fact. None of these suppers were written down, not in the households where they mattered most. They moved from one pair of hands to another. A daughter watched her mother add the cracklings to the batter without measuring. A granddaughter stood at the stove and learned by standing there. The knowledge lived in the body, in the timing, in the look of the batter, or the sound of the skillet, or the smell of the broth when it was finally right. That is the thing that cannot be recovered once it's gone. The recipes can be written down now. Some of them have been. But the part that made them work, the 40 years of Tuesday nights behind a single pair of hands, that doesn't transfer to paper. Number 12 is what the wartime kitchen turned to when the ration book was nearly punched through. Number 12, dried pea soup. By 1943, the ration book governed the kitchen in ways that shaped every supper on its pages. Meat was rationed. Butter was rationed. Canned goods were rationed. What wasn't rationed? Dried legumes. Dried peas, split and sold in paper bags, were available when almost nothing else reliably was. Split pea soup was 1 cup of dried peas simmered in water with a ham hock or salt pork, 1 carrot when the garden or the store offered 1, salt held until the beans were soft. Left on the back of the stove for 2 hours. The peas dissolved into the liquid, thickening it without any stirring or intervention, the ham hock releasing its collagen slowly until the broth had a body that felt substantial. It was filling in the way that only slow-cooked dried legumes are filling, not the quick fullness of bread, but a slower satisfaction that lasted through the evening. USDA records from 1943 and 1944 show that dried peas and beans appeared in working-class household diets several times a week during peak rationing years, not as a hardship food, as a strategy. The women managing those households understood the nutritional trade-off, protein and calories at a fraction of the cost of rationed meat, before anyone was using that kind of language. They were just keeping everyone fed. Number 11 is the supper that required the least, which is different from saying it asked for nothing. Number 11, noodles with butter and salt. Egg noodles, a tablespoon of butter, salt, and black pepper. That's the whole recipe. A bag of egg noodles cost about 19 cents in 1943. Boiled in well-salted water until fully soft, not al dente, not firm, but genuinely cooked, through the way the 1940s kitchen preferred its pasta. Drained. Butter added immediately to the hot noodles, so it melted on contact. Salt, pepper, tossed in the pot, and eaten from a bowl. This is the supper that asks you to do one thing perfectly: salt the water. Undersalted water produces noodles that taste of nothing, and butter and pepper cannot rescue them. Properly salted water, water that tastes faintly of the sea, produces noodles that carry their own flavor into the bowl, and the butter and pepper then become accents rather than the entire architecture. The 1940s kitchen knew this. It knew it without discussing it. The right amount of salt in the water was not a measurement. It was a judgment, confirmed by taste, passed on by watching. Families who ate noodles with butter on lean nights did not experience it as a failure of supper. The noodles were hot. The butter was real. The bowl was full. There are 10 suppers left. Number 10 is the one from the beginning, 7 people, 11 cents. Here's where we open that. Number 10, the 11-cent supper, 7 people. One Tuesday night in 1943, 11 cents. Here's what was on the table. Cornmeal mush, cooked thin, more like a porridge than a sliceable loaf, seasoned with salt. A pot of it cost about 4 cents for a family of 7. Fried pork scraps, the small pieces trimmed from a larger cut during the week, saved in a bowl in the icebox, fried in their own fat until browned. The scraps cost nothing. They were already in the kitchen. Stewed tomatoes from a jar she'd put up in August, already opened earlier in the week. The second half of the jar reheated in a saucepan with a pinch of sugar. Half a jar, maybe 3 cents of the original cost. Cornbread baked in a 6-inch skillet. For cents, that is 11 cents. That is supper for 7 people on a Tuesday night in a working-class household during the second year of American involvement in the war. It wasn't elegant. Nobody is arguing that. But the mush absorbed the stewed tomatoes. The pork scraps gave fat and salt and something to chew. The cornbread held everything together at the edge of the bowl. 7 people ate. Nobody went to bed with nothing. How she arrived at that number, exactly, that combination, at exactly that cost, closes further down this list. For now, number 9 is the night the supper tasted like something almost sweet. Number 9, fried apple rings. When the apples came in from the tree in September, she put some up, and she cooked some immediately. Fried apple rings, apples cored and sliced crosswise into rounds about a ½ inch thick, laid into a skillet with a spoon of lard already shimmering over medium heat. Cooked 3 to 4 minutes per side, without pressing or moving them, until each ring had softened through and caramelized at the edges, where the natural sugars met the hot fat. Dusted with sugar and cinnamon before the last minute of cooking, which melted into the surface. Eaten alongside pork, sometimes poured with a little sorghum molasses. Sometimes eaten plain, from the pan, as the closest thing to dessert the week offered. A bushel of apples from a backyard tree cost nothing. A spoon of lard cost a fraction of a cent. This was a supper side that tasted like a different category of food entirely. Warm and sweet and faintly spiced, a relief from the salt and fat that anchored most of the week's suppers. The 1940s kitchen understood contrast, not as a culinary concept, as a practical matter of making a meal feel like more than its parts by putting one sweet thing beside everything savory. That understanding, that one apple ring could make a bowl of mush feel like a full supper, is a kind of intelligence no cookbook chapter has ever quite captured. Number 8 is the supper that turned breakfast into evening. Number 8, sawmill gravy. Over biscuits, some night's supper was whatever the morning left behind. Sawmill gravy, named for the logging camps of the rural South, where it fed men before dawn, was made from pork sausage or sausage drippings, flour, and whole milk. You cooked the sausage in a heavy skillet, crumbled small, then didn't drain the fat. That fat was the point. 2 tablespoons of flour stirred into it over medium heat until the raw smell disappeared, then milk added slowly. A cup and a half, whisked constant, until the whole pan thickened into a pale, speckled gravy with pieces of sausage distributed throughout. Poured over split biscuits already warm from the oven. This appeared at supper in households, where breakfast for supper was not a novelty, but a rotation. Thursday night, sometimes. The night before payday. The night when the week's planning had come up slightly short, and the sausage in the icebox was closer to the beginning of a meal than the end of one. Nobody who ate it, as a child, remembers feeling shortchanged. The gravy was rich and savory, and the biscuits were real, and the whole thing was hot. The supper that required the most patience of anything on this list is right ahead. Number 7. She started cooking it at noon. Number 7. Turnip greens with pot liquor. She started this one at noon for a 6 o'clock table. Turnip greens, thick, slightly tough leaves pulled from the garden or bought in a bunch for a few cents at the market, washed in several changes of water because grit hides in greens and one sandy bite ruins everything. Dropped into a large pot with a piece of smoked ham hock or salt pork and enough water to cover generously. Brought to a boil, reduced to a slow simmer, left alone. Over 6 hours, the greens went from rough and fibrous to silky, dark, collapsed into themselves, and deeply flavored, with pork and the mineral bitterness of the leaf itself. The water they cooked in turned dark green and intensely savory. Pot liquor, the cooking liquid, which some families drank from a cup the way others drink broth. The pot liquor was not discarded. It contained everything that had cooked out of the greens, minerals, flavor, the slow extraction of 6 hours of simmering. Cornbread went into it, or was held alongside to soak it up. In a household where nutrition was not a concept, but a daily negotiation, turnip greens cooked low and long with a piece of pork were among the most nutrient-dense suppers on this list. She didn't know that in those terms. She knew her family ate well on supper nights, when the greens had been going since noon. Number 6 is where this list stops for one moment. Because something happened in 1945 that changed the kitchen in a way nobody quite expected. Number 6, Sunday chicken. Sunday chicken was the one meat supper of the week. A whole chicken, bought at the market or taken from the yard, cut into pieces, dredged in seasoned flour, fried in a heavy skillet in an inch of lard, until deeply golden on all sides, and cooked through. Set on a rack or on brown paper to drain, while the gravy came together from the drippings in the pan. Eaten at the table with everyone present. In 1943 and 1944, this supper was made possible by the ration book. Chicken wasn't rationed the way beef was. It was the protein that the wartime household could reliably afford and reliably access. Then the war ended. August 1945. The ration books were phased out. Meat was available. Butter was available. Things that had been scarce or absent for years were suddenly in the store. And something strange happened in kitchens across the country. The women who had spent 4 years building an entire knowledge system around what wasn't available, who had learned to make one egg feed 6, to turn pan drippings into supper, to start a pot of beans in the morning, because there would be no meat at night. Those women stood in their kitchens in the fall of 1945 and didn't quite know what to do with a full pantry. The constraint had shaped everything. The rationing had not just limited what she cooked. It had structured how she thought. When it lifted, she could buy more. But the knowledge she'd built in those 4 years, the precise intelligence of absolute economy, that didn't lift with it. It stayed in her hands. And in the kitchens that held on to it, in the households, where Sunday chicken stayed Sunday chicken even after the rationing ended, because it was right, and it was theirs, those kitchens kept something that the ones that forgot it never got back. Number 5, salt pork. Here's what never ran out. Through rationing and tight weeks, and the months when the ration book was nearly punched, through and the pantry was down to almost nothing. One thing stayed on the shelf. Salt pork, heavily cured, shelf-stable, sold in a piece, or sliced at the store for a few cents a pound. It didn't require refrigeration. It lasted, and it did more work per penny than almost anything else in the 1940s kitchen. It flavored the beans. It rendered into the cornbread fat. It went into the greens. It started the potato soup. It fried alongside the biscuits. When there was nothing else to add to a pot of boiling water, a piece of salt pork went in, and the water became something worth eating in. That's the thing, from the beginning of this list, the one item that held every week's suppers together. Salt pork on the same shelf, every year, in nearly every working-class household, through everything. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a showpiece. It was the constant, the thing she bought before anything else, and the last thing she ran out of. The small, steady, unacknowledged backbone of 4 years of feeding people under pressure. Some kitchens still have a piece in the refrigerator right now. The households that never stopped know exactly why. Number 4 is where that knowledge traveled, inland, far from the water, to find a fish that kept. Number 4, fried salt fish and potatoes. The fish arrived dried and pressed flat, and so heavily salted it could sit in a cool pantry for weeks. Salt cod, or whatever dried salt fish was available at a reasonable price in a given region, required a full day of preparation before it ever touched a pan. Submerged in cold water the night before, soaked and drained, and soaked again, through the day, the salt drawing out slowly until the fish had softened and the brine level dropped to something edible. By evening it was ready. Potatoes boiled separately, skins on, until just tender, then peeled and sliced. The salt fish went into a skillet with a spoon of lard, broken into large flakes, as it cooked, the outside crisping slightly, while the inside stayed moist from the soaking. The potatoes added to the pan for the last few minutes, soaking up the fat and picking up the faint brininess of the fish. Households far from any coastline ate this supper regularly throughout the 1940s. The fish had traveled to them already preserved. They didn't think of it as an unusual ingredient. They thought of it as the fish supper. What strikes you now is the patience it asked for. A supper that required a decision the evening before, a full day of preparation, and then 20 minutes at the stove. The modern kitchen would find a faster substitute. The 1940s kitchen understood that the best things required being started before you were hungry. Number 3 is the supper that ended the week by closing every account. Number 3, supper soup by Friday night. The kitchen had a record of the whole week. In the pot, the ham bone, from Sunday, already used twice for flavor and still giving. The end of the bean soup, from Wednesday, about a cup left in the pot. 2 potatoes soft enough that they wouldn't last the weekend. Half an onion. A small amount of greens wilted further than anyone would choose to eat them on their own. Broth saved from anything that had simmered during the week. Pork, beans, vegetables, collected in a jar by the stove. Everything went in together. Water added to cover. Salt, pepper, whatever herbs were in the garden or dried on the shelf. An hour on the stove. What came out was not a recipe. It was a different soup every Friday, because every week was different. But it was always good, concentrated, layered, built from the accumulated flavor of everything that had come before it. Nothing from the week was wasted. Everything had been accounted for. This supper did not have a name in most households. It was just what you made on Friday, with what was left. Some families called it icebox soup. Some called it clean-out soup. Most didn't call it anything. It was the supper that proved the whole week had been managed well. An empty pot on Friday night meant she'd planned right. Every day had fed into this one. Number 2. Here's how 7 people ate for 11 cents. Number 2. The 11-cent supper. Loop 3 closes. The math from number 10. Cornmeal, 4 cents for enough mush to fill 7 bowls. Cooked with water and salt into a soft porridge, ladled hot into bowls as the base of the meal. Pork scraps, the trimmings saved from earlier in the week, kept in a small bowl in the icebox, fried in their own fat until browned and slightly crisped. Cost, nothing. Already in the kitchen, half a jar of stewed tomatoes, the second half of what had been opened 2 nights before. 3 cents at most of the original cost of the jar she'd put up in August. Cornbread from the skillet, the batter mixed in 5 minutes. 4 cents for the cornmeal, Less than a cent for the lard and salt. 11 cents. But here's the thing the price doesn't capture. She made those choices deliberately. The pork scraps saved because she knew they'd be needed. The second half of the tomato jar timed to this exact night. The cornmeal in the bin because she'd bought it when it was cheapest. The cornbread made because she knew mush alone wasn't quite enough. 7 people sat down to supper. Nobody was hungry when they got up. That outcome, full people, 11 cents, nothing wasted, nothing borrowed, was not luck. It was the result of a week of decisions made by a woman who understood her kitchen the way a carpenter understands lumber. What it cost, what it could do, how far it would go. Number 1 is the supper she made every week, in every season, in every kitchen across this country. The one that never left. Number 1, one-pot bean stew. It goes by different names depending on where you were. In the South it was pintos with salt pork. In Appalachia it was soup beans. In the rural Midwest it was navy beans with a ham hock. In some households it was black-eyed peas. In others, great northern beans or kidney beans or whatever dried legume was cheapest at the store that week. But the structure was always the same. Dried beans soaked overnight and simmered all day with a piece of cured pork and water and salt. One pot, 6 to 8 hours. A low flame and patience. The result was always the same too. A thick, deeply flavored stew, the beans soft throughout, the broth a dark amber, that tasted of pork and starch and thyme. Eaten with cornbread, ladled into bowls at a table where everyone sat down at once. This is the supper that appears on this list last, because it is the one that never left. Not in the 1940s, not in the 1970s, not now. Somewhere tonight, in a kitchen in this country, there is a pot of beans that has been on the stove since morning. There is a piece of salt pork at the bottom of it. There is cornbread either in the oven or already on the counter. The supper outlasted the decade that made it necessary. It outlasted the rationing and the lean years and the whole economic pressure that produced it, because it turned out the beans were never just a solution to a problem. They were just good. The knowledge required to make them right, the overnight soak, the low simmer, the salt held, until the end, the cornbread built to soak the pot liquor, that knowledge is still worth having. The women who held it knew that before anyone thought to say so. Back at the beginning of this list, 9 cents for a pound of dried beans. A family of 6. Not always enough. You saw what you did with that. 1 egg stretched across 6 bowls of hot broth. Salt pork on the same shelf every single week, the one constant that held every supper together no matter what else ran out. 7 people fed for 11 cents on a Tuesday night in 1943, not by accident, not by luck, but by the specific and practiced knowledge of a woman who had done the math so many times it had become instinct. 25 suppers. Not one of them required a recipe card. Not one of them required more than what was already there. There's a word people reach for when they talk about this kind of cooking. Resourceful, simple, making do. Those are the wrong words. What you watched across this list was precision. Economy of a very high order. The intelligence of someone who could not afford to waste a dripping, a heel of bread, a single egg, and who fed people well anyway, every night, for years. That knowledge lived in hands, not cookbooks. It passed from one kitchen to the next without being written down because it didn't need to be. There was always someone nearby who already knew. The question worth sitting with is this: when that generation is gone and the kitchens that held that knowledge go quiet, where does it go?